Welcome to Sib Spot. Today's Reddit stories are from PettyRevenge. Story 1 is by OKOpening5704. My homeless dad used me in his money scheme, so I took it all. Okay, so the homeless guy is technically my dad. My dad was only in my life actively from the ages from 0 to 7, and in that time gave me a ton of trauma. He was a hardcore alcoholic manipulator and a lot of other things I can't say. My mom, being the hero she is, left him for a short bit, but we did weekends at his place. It was a never-ending cycle of him drinking, being a piece of crap, and buying us over with animals and gifts. After getting several DUIs, unpaid child support, and a few child endangerment cases, he up and left to avoid going to jail. Disappeared, left the animals locked in the house that he abandoned, and shut off his phone. Every few months or so, he would randomly show up at my school drunk and crying with gifts in hand or leave notes on our door. My school literally had to implement a safety plan because my mom was scared he would take me. That stopped and didn't hear from him again for about 13 years. When I was 20, he messaged me on Facebook saying he would love to get to know me and asking if there's anything I need financially. My initial response, sick to my stomach and crying, quickly turned to anger. I was broke and could really use the money, and he owed me, right? I told him I would meet and needed the money for rent. When I saw him, my stomach turned. He looked like the crazy guy you see on the side of the road begging for money. He really didn't make much sense, just talked a lot of crap about my mom, saying she was a liar and turned us against him and mumbling nonsense. Apparently, his brother, my uncle that I have never really had a relationship with, would no longer give him money but would wire transfer him money for me. He told his brother I needed $1,500 and told me he would take $500 and give me $1,000. His crappy burner phone ran out of minutes, so one of the calls to his brother was made from my phone. Of course, he didn't have an ID or anything, so I would need to pick it up with him. When someone wires you money, they gives you the code and voila, you get the money. My dad wouldn't give me the code until we were physically at the place to pick it up, which we planned to do the following morning. The next morning, I decided to text my uncle since I now had his number and ask him directly for the code. I got the code, picked up the money, and blocked my piece of crap dad. He made sure to leave some deranged voicemails about how big of a piece of crap I am. He pretty much used me to get money from his brother. If he really wanted to be in my life, he would have taken the proper steps to do so and change, but he never did. Not denying what I did wasn't crappy, but also, F my dad. Edit. My uncle does well financially and obviously was fine with sending me money, which at the time I definitely needed. I saw a few comments saying I helped scam my uncle, which I just don't get. He thought he was sending money to me and helped me out. The money went to me and helped me out, and of course I thanked him. Top comment by Anxiety Nervous 3994 says, "Don't worry about it. Your uncle would only send money for you. You just honored his wishes in taking the money. There's no doubt it's better in your hands than your dad's." Underneath that by TruckPure6828, agreed. Uncle never intended for your dad to get the money, and your dad only reached out to you so he could manipulate the situation for a buck. Thank God I've never had to deal with somebody like that. That is absolutely nuts. He probably has a lot of addictions. If he looks that unkempt and he's desperate for cash, it's probably an addiction-related thing. But yeah, no pity. I do think, OP, that it probably would have been better if you'd contacted the uncle and said, "Hey, I never told my dad that I needed this money. I haven't been in contact with him. He lied to you, but I actually do need the money. Is it all right if I keep it?" He would totally be fine with it, but I think you should at least be honest with him there. And of course, people in the comments were very concerned about what's happening to the animals, and he did edit the post. It got cut off at the bottom of my screenshot, but he did edit the post and say the animals were rescued and they're perfectly fine. They didn't get locked away forever. Our next post is by Sir Gakar. I'll have what she's having. Another post reminded me of some petty revenge I got on a friend who liked to split the bill, so I thought I would share. It started out with working together above a mall food court where we would take turns buying lunch, then progress to lunches and eventually dinners, mostly with a group of colleagues and occasionally one-on-one. Those lunches were always split evenly, but we never had drinks or anything too fancy. Over the years, the group changed and moved on, but the two of us lived in the same neighborhood and still worked at the same building, if not the same department, so we would catch up over the occasional meal. After a while, I noticed we were splitting the bill evenly, but I was not ordering drinks and appetizers and desserts, and she was. Of course, she'd offered me a bite of her cake, or a shrimp from her cocktail, but not half. I commented on it eventually, and her response was what kicked in the petty revenge. Her answer to my comment was basically, "We usually have the same thing, and I always share it, so it's fair. I don't know why you would want to make the server do extra work." So my revenge was simple. The next time we went out to eat, I waited for her to order, then I told the server, "I'll have what she's having." I got a bit of side-eye, especially when I asked for a takeout container for my leftovers, and a big frown when the bill came. The second time, she asked me to order first. I did, then she ordered her usual extravagant meal. Before the server walked away, I said, "Her order sounds really good, I'll have the same." This time, she suggested she might not have enough money to cover, so I suggested she drop the dessert and maybe not order the second drink. She frowned at me again and said never mind. She had the audacity to complain that she usually doesn't spend that much. I just said, weird. My bill is about the same. And that was that. She never invited me for another meal again, and when I invited her, she said she couldn't afford it. I still see her occasionally, and she's still bitter. She has no right to be bitter. She's basically having you pay for her extravagant meals. Like, you get the bill and you split it exactly in half. Any server is fine splitting the bill based on what you order and based on what she orders. It's not that complicated. She's complaining, "I don't know why you'd want the server to do extra work." We know why you're doing this, woman. You are doing this to get cheaper food. Our next post is by 3D Putty, and it's a bit of a reverse petty revenge, as it's titled, "My Coworker's Revenge on Me." Back when I first started in my industry, a friend of mine from university landed a job at my company too. The place was 4 levels with an atrium in the middle. I was on the 3rd floor and he was on the 1st floor, but I could see him from my desk. He didn't know this yet, and he didn't know where I was seated. Anyway, so I let him get settled for the morning. Then I anonymously message him. You could do this in our internal messaging system. "Carl," fake name, "meet me at my office immediately." I watched as he looked slightly panicked, looking through the office. Then he replies, "Sorry, who is this? Can I ask where your office is?" Me, "Now, Carl, I don't have time for this." He started to look really panicked, then got up and walked into the atrium, turning around in circles looking at the offices. I felt bad about it now and waved down to him and saying, "Now, Carl." Being the good-hearted guy he was, he laughed and mouthed a word that people often refer to as "see you next Tuesday." And I went back to work giggling. A few days later, I started hearing a very occasional and very high-pitched eep beep in the office I shared with 2 others. It was very subtle, almost out of hearing spectrum to the point where you weren't sure you were hearing it. But once I did accept that I was really hearing it, it became more and more noticeable with each beep, and more irritating. The time was unpredictable. Think 10 minutes between beeps, 30 minutes, then 2 minutes, 1 hour. So I let it go for quite a while before I started to accept that I might be going mad and asked the others if they heard it too. They both looked almost relieved and said they have. It was driving them mad too. So we started looking around the office, pulling shelves apart, emptying drawers, pulling pictures down. I even sat outside the office for a few hours to make sure it wasn't coming from outside. It wasn't. We also timed the beeps all day to see if we could find a pattern. No pattern. It seemed completely random. The following day, we got serious and started pulling apart our PCs one at a time. We were all looking a bit wild-eyed by this point. Eventually, as I'm sure you've guessed, Carl arrived at the office, laughing at us sitting on the floor with our PCs in pieces, and told us he'd taped this small, evil noise device under a shelf. He said he would have left it longer, but our boss thought it had gone on long enough. Touché, Carl. Touché indeed, Carl. That's great petty revenge right there. Oh, this also triggered somebody else's little story. In the comments by Future Direction 5174. The deputy head of our department could see my desk from his desk. It took 2 minutes to walk there from his office. I was ahead of a section which reported to his assistant, who reported to him. I was having problems with my deputy and had been griping about how when I was out of the office, she refused to answer my phone. He got to hear of this and decided to test her one day. So he rang my phone, put his handset down on his desk, and walked around the corridors to our open plan office. "Why aren't you answering the phone?" he asked her. I was at court prosecuting some non-payers. She walked slowly across to my desk, no hurry. "There's no one there," she said. "I know," he replied. "Because she claimed that you refused to answer her phone, I walked here to see if she was correct." Then he pointed to his office where you could see the phone was placed in the window with the handset off. Steve was a fantastic boss. 6'6" in his 40s, but had a severe limp and walked with a cane due to stroke. Him making the efforts to walk from his office to mine despite his difficulty walking was the sort of boss he was. Let's say that when I resigned, she did not get promoted. And she hated my replacement so much that 3 months later she resigned herself to start a family. If she had just got pregnant and stuck it out for the first 6 months, she would have got 9 months fully paid maternity leave with a further 6 months unpaid. Shame. I wish I knew if that person got in trouble for not answering the phone. Just because your boss is out of the office doesn't mean you get to not answer the phone. It's not a break for you. And this person posting talks about how they were having problems with their deputy. I wonder if they're from another nation besides the US and they're talking about a secretary. Maybe not. Maybe deputy is just a word that's used. Deputy makes me think of a police office. So is this person leaving the office to work on some non-payers? Non-payers, do police handle that sort of thing? They don't do prosecutions. This person must be a law office. So I'm assuming that a deputy is like a secretary in a way. Maybe that's just what a secretary at a law office is called, a deputy. Somebody school me, please. I like learning from you guys way better than learning from Google. Somebody even answered my Tita question the other day. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Our stories for today have come to a close. Until we meet again, have a fascinating day.